Hey friends, welcome back to my channel where we create delicious food for as little money as possible. Today I'm sharing two super cheap meals that I rated a 10. In other words, I love the recipes and I'm hoping you will too. For my first recipe, I'm making the southern dish of stewed tomatoes and okra. I love okra and tomatoes, and this is a meal that can be made for well under $2. I'll make the stew and then serve it over white rice. Roma tomatoes were on sale, so I picked one up and it was only 18 cents. A lot of people use canned tomatoes in this recipe, but since I'm just cooking for myself, I think just a single Roma tomato is going to be much less expensive. Plus, I like to use fresh ingredients when I can. My regular market was completely out of okra, so I stopped by Ralph's on the way home and they had some for $3.99 a pound, and I had no idea how much that was going to be, so I just got two and it ended up being 16 cents. I guess I should have went back in and grabbed a couple more, but I figured I'm cooking for myself, so it'll probably be plenty. For spices, I'll be using a smoky paprika along with some Tony's Creole seasoning, and if you don't have that, it's basically just a blend of salt, chili powder, pepper, and garlic. And I'll also be using a tiny amount of vegetable bouillon because I do want to make a broth in this stew in order to pour it over my rice and have a nice flavorful dish. Doesn't this tomato look vibrant? I love using fresh tomatoes in my recipes. Even if I count myself as using a couple of servings of rice, I'm actually only eating about 54 cents worth of food in this recipe, but even if you bought the 1 pound bag of rice, you're still only spending $1.46 for a nice meal, and then you have all of those servings of rice left over. I think ideally I would have had 4 okra, and of course you could always use the frozen bags as well and then just use a small portion out of that. Freezer space is coveted in my family, so unfortunately I can't buy too many frozen foods. I'm also adding some water and then I'll add just a tiny amount of the vegetable bouillon so that my sauce has a nice rich flavor. I used my Aroma rice cooker to make the rice. It turns out perfect every time. This is so good. If you like tomatoes, you would probably like this. Sometimes okra can be kind of slimy, which I'm actually okay with, but it wasn't slimy in this dish at all. I know sometimes people will add vinegar to this, but it's quite acidic already with the tomatoes, so I didn't feel that I needed to add it in. And also, if you're trying to feed a family for just $2 and you weren't sure if the kids would like the okra, you could always do like I did and go lighter on the okra and more heavy on the tomatoes. But pretty much guaranteed, if they taste this and see how flavorful it is, I mean, this is just a super satisfying comfort meal. I can see why this is so popular. You can also buy this canned version at Walmart, and as you can see, it's quite popular. I think I featured this on my channel a couple years ago when I picked it up at Dollar Tree, but now that I've made my own, I can tell you that it doesn't compare to the canned version. Mine was just so much more flavorful, plus it's much less expensive. For my next meal, I'm making bubble and squeak. This is a popular British dish that is known as one of the great peasant dishes of the world. I have some cabbage along with onions, and I'm using 1 potato and 1 egg. It's my understanding that there are lots of variations on this, but there are always 2 main ingredients, and that's potatoes and cabbage. I think the idea behind this is to make a delicious meal out of leftover potatoes, but I don't have any leftover potatoes, so I'm just going to boil mine in some salted water, and then I'll fry up some cabbage and onions, just like I did for the halushki that I made last week. Some of my viewers actually told me that they prefer their halushki with potatoes instead of the egg noodles, and it's surprising how similar this recipe is to that one, except for this one we're going to fry it to a nice golden brown once we assemble all of these ingredients. And I also forgot to mention in last week's video for that halushki that some people use gnocchi when they make that, so I thought I would mention that this week since this recipe is somewhat similar. However, to me this recipe tastes completely different. This would probably be best if I let the potatoes cool down and dry out some more, but I'm hungry now, so I'm not going to wait. I'm just going to mash these up, and then I'm going to taste them to see if they need a little bit more seasoning, and then I'll add in the remaining ingredients. The next step is to fry this in one big piece until it's crispy, and I have this mini cast iron skillet that I think will be perfect. And just so you can get an idea of the size, this is a regular size cup, and I want it to almost be sizzling before I add in my potato mixture. We want lots of crispy bits. I was trying to keep this all in one piece, but I didn't think it was going to be able to flip, so I had to cut it in half. You guys, this meal was so good. It was a 10 for me. It just seemed so perfectly balanced with the cabbage and the potatoes. And I also think that last week I used real garlic, and this week I used garlic salt. And I think that it helped to season every single bite that I had. And if you were serving this to somebody and they didn't know what was in it, they would just think it tasted like the world's most tastiest hash browns, because that's what it tastes like to me. I feel like this is a meal that I could serve at a fancy bed and breakfast, and people would be trying to recreate this dish at home, but they wouldn't know the ingredients, so they'd never be able to recreate it unless you told them that you had cabbage in this. It's so flavorful and so delicious. I feel like this needs to be a meal that's eaten at least once a week. That's how good it is. If you wanted to add anything to it, maybe you could add some sauteed spinach on the side, or even some sliced fresh tomatoes on top. I think that'd be nice. And I think it would be good also if you wanted to add some meat to this dish. You could add in a can of diced ham if you wanted to, or you could incorporate bacon or sausage. Sometimes just changing out one ingredient gives you a completely different meal, but I am sad that this meal is over. I'm already wanting to eat it again. That's it, guys. I hope that these are recipes that you want to make in your own kitchen. I'll be back next week with a much longer video. See you soon.
Which way do I follow? What happens tomorrow? I turn to you and hope you can guide the way. Sometimes I give up, just wanna be on my